Hello, this is Sam Gerrans from samgerrans.com. Today is Friday the 26th of May 2023, and today we're going to look at a piece of propaganda. It's all propaganda. This will be propaganda too, trying to get you into the idea of why it's okay not to have any basically morals or religion. I guess that's what it's about. I haven't read it yet. If you want to help my work, then the way to do that is to be a paid subscriber to my Substack. Details below, or donate or something like that. All those details are below. Anyway, let's just jump into this and see what it is like. I'm back with The Independent, the laughingly called Independent. And again, people say, well, Sam, you're always picking on The Independent. The Independent is free. I don't have to pay to get past a firewall to become indoctrinated with this nonsense. And also, it's fairly representative. Also, it's supposed to be somewhat highbrow, or at least it was when I was younger. It's just tosh. It's all tosh. Let's look at it together. Here we are. Forgive me, Father, but my generation would rather go to hell. Well, at least it's a good job, because that's generally where you're all going. As the West veers chaotically towards an imagined secular utopia, it is unsurprising that a few theological inconsistencies are beginning to arise, writes Finn McRedmond. I haven't read this. I don't need to. I'm fairly it will be propaganda. We're just going to look at it and see what type it is. So let's just jump in and see what this is about. I've had this on my list for about 4 or 5 days. I saw the title. I thought, yes, going to hit that one. God is dead. The youth have killed him. So says a study from King's College London, which found that 49% of Brits say they believe in God, down from 75% in 1981, with young people leading the atheistic charge. Now, of course, implicit in this statement is the idea that God's existence is dependent on a vote. You see, democracy, this idea that a certain majority, supposedly majority of people, believe something makes it true or more valid or gives it some sort of credence, is total nonsense. The ancients would have laughed at this. In fact, they wouldn't have understood it. It would have been complete anathema to them. But clearly, young people who haven't got the sense they were born with often have been highly indoctrinated by means of music, films, pieces like this, so-called education. Their opinion means something. Yes, they have an opinion and it counts. Anyway, here we go. Young people are leading the atheistic charge. Just so you know, that the whole God is dead thing, this you quite often find that they have quite they have the output of complex pieces of philosophical reasoning reduced essentially to slogans. So God is dead. Obviously, this comes from Nietzsche, and you know, just do it. There you are. That's Aleister Crowley. It's not just a British thing either. Oh, I see. So this is a greater appeal to the majority, which is actually an appeal to a majority. There are several ways in which you can spin up people's minds, and they work on people who are not able to think, which is the majority of people, which is why democracy implicitly is an insane, insidious idea, and that's why it's been given to you. You see, that's why it's been given to you. And one of them is the idea that there's an appeal to the majority. Well, that sort of, 9 out of 10 cat owners say their cats prefer it, or whatever it is. There's an appeal to an authority. Say for example, footballer X uses this type of toothpaste, so you should too, or whatever it is. And because people follow, they're followers, and this is known that most people are followers. If you break down the traditional classifications of masculinity into alpha, beta, and sigma, it's actually only sigmas who are actually independent, and this forms about 1% of the population. The alphas are basically looking for approbation, and they follow from the front. Actually, what they need is lots of people to kind of clap and applaud them all the time, and the betas are just basically looking for someone to follow. It's actually the sigmas, who 1% of the population, are able to use their minds and act independently. Just on this point of acting, I'm going to quickly say, I know I'm supposed to be keeping my talks to a minimum because people haven't got, an attention span. 10 minutes is supposed to be the cut-off point. But anyway, I'll just quickly tell you on the question of act. It's an interesting distinction when you read, for example, about the ancient Romans. And a gentleman didn't work. You see, he didn't work. He had slaves, and you think, oh well, there you are. This was oppressive and terrible. Well, you could argue it was oppressive and terrible. I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But they were very busy. Cicero was busy. They were all busy. It wasn't that they didn't do anything. It's that they didn't work. Now, what do you mean by work? Languages are very instructive. Let's just take the Russian language, which is something I know something about. You have the word for work, which is работать. Работать comes from the word rab. It means rab is slave. Работать, although it has come now to mean to work, it actually means to slave. And a slave is somebody who does something for somebody else without understanding the reasons why. He's somebody who basically is fulfilling another person's agenda stupidly and without any understanding of why he's doing it. That is work. Whereas to act, in Russian, действовать, from the word действие, to do, to choose to do, to act. That's the difference. And if you can get that distinction between acting and working, you go from being basically a slave mind to somebody who is in charge of their own mind, and you can actually get things done in the world. And that's why working, you may do both actually at different times in your life, and understand that why one of them is very satisfying and why one of them is completely unsatisfying. It's because we don't have the language. The language is being destroyed. On that point, I'm rereading 1984, and I've marked out a few bits that I'm going to read to people, because this book, if you haven't read 1984 by George Orwell, here you are. Read it, for goodness sake. I mean, this is basically 101. But there's some points in here which are I'll just see if I can find the first one, which really hit me when I read it. And I thought, you know what? Why did I not see this the first time around? Just to do with the question of feminism and so on. I'm obviously not going to be able to find it. But anyway, let's see if I can. Yes, maybe I can. I might have to cut this so that I can not bore my audience. Here we are. Yeah, got it. Page 12. It was always the women, and above all the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents of the party, the swallowers of slogans, the amateur spies, and nosers out of unorthodoxy. There's a lot more where that came from. Anyway, we'll jump back into this. Let's see where we are. It's not just a British thing either. Oh yeah, here we are. In 2023, only 39% of Americans said religion was important to them, compared to 62% in 1998. Yes, well, you see, this is because they've all been swallowing the same indoctrination. I'm certain, fairly sure there's not going to be much in the way of explanation of why this has changed. In Ireland, faith has waned too, a casualty of the country's recent and precipitous liberalisation. Yes, liberalisation. You hear this word, liberalisation. I'll just tell you what liberalisation actually is. It's a policy of demoralisation, where you are broken down into an atom, and the things which could conceivably make you problematical to the state, and when I say state, I mean deep state, are systematically whittled away. That's what it is, until you're just a selfish, solipsistic, immoral blob, sitting there with your entitlements, expecting somebody to come and fulfill them. Who's going to fulfill them? It's going to have to be the government. Anyway, let's jump on. We'll see, get through the rest of this. As the West veers chaotically towards an imagined secular utopia, it is unsurprising that a few theological inconsistencies are beginning to arise. I don't see why that should be the case. Actually, what should be the case is that as this gets worse, the church, or religion in general, should hold more resolutely to the actual truth. But I mean, to some extent, if you look at what's happened to the Catholic Church ever since Vatican II, I mean, are there any Catholics left? They don't seem to believe in Catholicism anymore, and it's a fundamental mistake, because as things get worse, if you hold resolutely to the tenets of your faith, whatever that may be, you will find that people come to you. Sure, you're going to lose the midwits and the kind of the beaters and all these people who just follow. They just followed before, and they're going to follow now, and you'll have a more solid support base of people whose opinions and actual actions, are worth something. You see. And anyway, let's get into what this is. Young people might not believe in God, but they are just as likely to believe in some kind of afterlife as their older counterparts. Well, of course they will. What do you think that the afterlife is for these people? It's a kind of a continuation of all the best parts, as they conceive it, of modernity, without any of the downside. So it's shopping malls and carousels and a limitless credit card that you never have to pay off. Something like that, you see. But I'll tell you what it won't include. I already know what it won't include. What it won't include is any accountability, and it certainly won't believe in hell. If you don't believe in hell as a fact, then you don't believe in the afterlife. It's just a fact. It's just a delusional solipsistic extension of the same kind of delusion which has brought us to the point which we're at now. They are also more likely to believe in hell. Oh, is that true? Well, we'll see. How's that for some despairing incoherence? Well, despairing incoherence is more like how I'd describe this type of article. Like believing shadow can exist, they are also more likely to believe in hell. I would have said they're more likely not to believe in hell. How's that for some despairing incoherence? Like believing shadow can exist independently of light, or accepting the existence of night while refusing to acknowledge day. Hell is not a standalone concept. Well, heaven is not a standalone concept. By definition, the two are intrinsically linked. Nevertheless, believe in hell but not in God is a troubling epitaph for a rather miffed-off generation. Miffed-off. You see this kind of poncy language she's using here to make it sound as if she can write. It's not even miffed off anyway. It's miffed if you want to actually know how to use the word. But anyway, let's get into the rest of it. But it is hardly any wonder for a cohort whose characteristic is formed and shaped by. This is a question. Is it hardly any wonder for a cohort whose character is formed and shaped by environmental anxiety? So what she's trying to do, she's actually trying to play cleverer than she is, which is quite something you meet quite a lot in the Independent. What she seems to be trying to do is to set herself up as some sort of arbiter in the existence or not of hell and heaven, and then to say that the fact that people do believe in hell is really just a kind of a form of transference, because the actual anxiety is about the environment. Well, any anxiety about the environment has been placed there by people like her. And we have a pre-existing, I would say a lot of people do, anxiety about the afterlife, which is actually hardwired into us. I would say, if anything, the reverse is true, that what's happened is that people's intrinsic religious sentiment, which is existent in the majority of people, has been perverted and warped and turned into a sort of expression of their has been used as and applied so that they can then give expression to this religion of the so-called environment. The relentless doomerism of climate change rhetoric, literally replete with the rhetoric of fire and brimstone, would make anyone think the flames of eternal damnation are both very real and about to consume us. Part of this is true, you see. I do agree that the climate change rhetoric is a religion. But what she's doing is she's trying to use this as her launching pad, as her sort of starting point for then to explain the reason why people believe in hell, rather than the fact of the inverse being true. It would be terribly unbecoming of a young liberal to believe that a great patriarch in the sky is going to offer salvation. It would be terribly unbecoming of a young liberal. Now, obviously, the people who are reading this, lots of them are young. They all consider themselves liberal, and so they'll just make a mental note that they're not allowed to believe in any sort of salvation, because then they're not being true to the tenets of their faith. That would seriously derail the arduous trek towards a progressive nirvana. Now, just on this point, they are on an arduous trek. If you define nirvana as being an immoral hellhole of perversion and filth, then certainly they're on track for that. And they're using the youth, particularly women, in order to get there. And they do it by spinning up their minds with propaganda. Okay. Waning Christianity, no matter its genesis. Oh, she thinks she's so clever. She's managed to, weave in a sort of, a Christian word, or at least for a word from the Christian Bible, Genesis. I'm sure she congratulated herself on that. Could be an era-defining moment. But if it is really happening, what will the world look like? Do cultural Catholics and faithless Anglicans and proud atheists seek, knowingly or not, something else to believe in, a kind of Christianity redux? Or is there a version of Britain that can be completely irreligious? Well, no, there isn't a version of anything that can be completely religious, because man is a religious creature by definition. It's just a question of what religion he's going to follow. And, she has something of a point that they are now being, sort of shuffled along the lines of a new religion. Polling figures can only capture so much about society's true religiosity. Even the most faithless among us may find it hard to deny that the architecture of this country is itself very Christian. Yeah, well, I mean, what the project that she's engaged upon, of course, is destroying that, that was set up by actual English people over actually millennia. And what she's trying to do is what they're trying to do in Britain anyway is to kind of redefine what it is to be British. And there is no definition you can really come to ultimately, because Britain has been destroyed like all the other Western countries pretty much. There are a few holdouts here and there, but that's what's happened. And their job is to kind of place all of that history and all of that thinking and philosophy and all the rest of it in a context in which it is sort of subservient and was only ever going towards what's happening now. This is it's called historical revisionism or even irredentism. That's what's actually happening, but it's happening in a very simplistic format. Just about so people who like to think they're intelligent can think they've learnt something and move on to carry on being basically selfish and stupid. Even the most faithless among us may find it hard to deny that the architecture of this country is itself very Christian. Yeah, well, I mean, of course it is. If you're looking at the actual religious history of Britain, observing weekends and divinely appointed monarchs are only two examples of God's imprint. Well, they're not exactly anything to do with God's imprint. They're to do with the way that men have interpreted scriptures and applied them politically. But they are historical realities, that's true. Humans will always crave the ephemeral, a higher power, an explanatory and organizational force outside of themselves, a lodestar. Well, she can write a bit, I guess, but, look what you end up writing. It's humiliating. These are things that have informed society as long as society has existed, whether it be the Greek and Roman pantheon, the Sumerians of Mesopotamia, the Zoroastrians. None of this goes away simply because a Pole ordains it. Well, yes, that's true, of course. God himself may no longer loom large in the life of Britons, and I've noticed this use of the word Britons. This is completely incorrect in the context of what, this formerly British country, what used to be England at least, and Scotland and Wales and so on, what they actually are. They're not Britons. You're sort of a kind of homogenized mass of nothing people. That's actually true. But they have to give you a sort of flag to wave. They might need you to go and fight a war at some point. But it's perfectly reasonable to suggest that his presence has been replaced by something else, the lure of the occult, perhaps. This whole thing about occult, I'll just mention this. I mean, there's a Christian occultism. Occult just means hidden. That's all it means. There's always been a separate narrative for the priesthood than there has been for the laity, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you think about, for example, there are always specialists in areas, and the simple people, I know you can't use this expression any longer, but it was a common expression up until quite recently, have never been able to understand things in the same sort of way. They're not going to be able to understand Hermeticism, or they're not going to be able to understand, the kind of the subtleties of metaphysics. It's not required of them. They understand in other ways. And so there are always different languages for explaining the same basic concepts. And the occultism of today, if we're talking about that, I mean, if you go back to people like Yelena Blavatsky, which doesn't really make sense if you're a Russian speaker, because it'd be Blavatskaya. It's just, anyway, it doesn't matter. And people like that, Alice Bailey and all of these people. A lot of it is just forgery and fakery, and quite a lot of it is actually Satanism. And so, that's what they think occultism is, but that's not how a medieval scholar would have understood that term. It's just been given this idea of it's been given a sort of luster of space dust to make people can always be attracted by things they don't understand and which they think are mysteries. And that's how you do it. It's just a form of PR, actually. Young millennials on Generation Z have reincarnated and imagined astrology for the 21st century, speaking directly to a need for order amid uncertainty. Celebrity worship may be a shallow imitation of real faith, but it certainly sounds familiar. Yeah, it does sound familiar. If you look at celebrity worship, I mean, if you think about it objectively, it really is a reincarnation of of the Greek pantheon, with gods who occasionally come down and visit human beings in human form. But it's a bit different to that as well, because there's a sort of implicit contradiction. Because the good thing about gods is they don't get any older. All right, they kind of get to whatever age they're at, and they stay there. You want your gods in a certain form of stasis. The problem is with the modern gods is they do two things. They stay in stasis, i.e. in whatever film you watch them in, but they also get older and die. And so what you have is a kind of an implicit contradiction. So our gods are a bit different. They're a bit the same, but they are a bit different. Try looking at a Swiftie, and I have no idea what a Swiftie is, and tell me that they don't worship a god. They do, of course, but their version has bangs. I'll just tell you, this word, bangs, this is an Americanism. It means a fringe. I believe that's what she's talking about, if that is what she's talking about. Seeing as I don't know what a Swiftie is, perhaps I am wrong, but I think she means a fringe. And I've noticed this with a couple of articles recently. They had a word labour, spelled L-A-B-O-R, in this same article. I think it was, or it was Western media. Anyway, these are Americanisms. So I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing that there's a foundational template somewhere for articles a bit like this, with some points that have to be hit, and she's hitting them. But she's not quite bright enough. I mean, she can write. She can write a bit. Let's not take that away from her. But she perhaps doesn't really understand the subject matter fully. But anyway, bangs is an Americanism. I've been out of the UK for 5 or 6 years, but I don't. I mean, tell me in the comments. Tell me if bangs. If you're from the UK, do you use bangs to mean a fringe? You know, like a hair fringe hanging down. Is that now common parlance? I'd be interested. I doubt it. They do, of course, but their version has bangs and a rhinestone bodysuit. No, it does mean what it does. It must mean what I think it means. Though, think of those who kneel at the altar of the market. The invisible hand sounds rather godly to me. Now, what she's talking about is Adam Smith here. You know, again, you see these complex philosophical movements reduced to memes. YOLO is the one I often bring up. And anyway, God is still present, but his shape and appeal is different. No, nothing's different about God. God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. That's the nature of God. If that is what God is, what she's talking about is a PR presentation of God. Perhaps the God these people believed in wasn't ever true. You know, because God is something beyond this. What she's really talking about is a mythology created by men, I think. Organized religion is certainly transformed and its influence significantly diminished, but any generation that believes in hell must accept the divine as well. Forgive us, Father, we still believe in you, we just don't know it. Okay, well, I think this is sort of what I would summarize this as being is a pseudo-clever piece of work. If you were to break this down and actually work out its logic on a piece of paper, you'd find out that it had, termini everywhere and doesn't really go anywhere definitive. It is a form of propaganda. It all is. I do agree that with one part of it, which is that if you do believe in an afterlife, i.e. in heaven, there is the correlation of hell. That bit is true. The rest of it is a sort of pseudo-psychological sort of exposition. Where I would agree is make peace with God, do it now, because they have been engaged in trying to destroy you. They've been doing it for, centuries actually, but they're really ramping things up now because they're heading toward the end game. And, seek God while he may be found. And that would be a good piece of advice. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I have my own views, of course, and I have made those views, I think, fairly clear in all of my work. If you're interested in that work, you can access it for free. If you go to samgerrans.com and look at books, which will be up across the top, it'll take you to some links. You can go there and you can download it for free. I'm not here pushing books, but you can get that information if you're interested in my view. But in any case, form a view and be truthful about it. Don't take an off-the-rack opinion, because you are going to have to give account for this. There is a day of accounting, a day of reckoning, and all of these pseudo journalists and all the newspapers and all of the people who are setting up what we see right now, we'll see them on that day. We'll see them, and we'll see in what state they are in, and they will see what state we are in, and then the actual reckoning will take place. Anyway, I think I've kind of finished on that one. If you want to support my work or anything like that, you can do it by subscribing to my Substack. As a paid subscriber, it's $10 a month. That really, really helps. You can also like this work, so share it, all those sorts of things. Watch them to the end as well, because that's apparently something that Google really cares about, and that really helps. Details of where I upload to, how you can join my Substack and Telegram channel, support my work and download my books free are in the description. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.